The divorce papers arrived before he could feel his legs again. Ginho Kim woke from surgery to find his spine shattered, his wife gone, and his bank accounts emptied, paralyzed in every sense of the word. Welcome to Stories by Jason. If you're settled in and ready for a good story, hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I've got another exciting story coming your way tomorrow, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. Thank you so much for the love and support. You're truly appreciated, and I'm so grateful to have you here with me. The stench of betrayal hit harder than the metal that crushed Ginho's spine. He didn't remember the impact. Didn't remember the guardrail puncturing the driver's side door like a spear through butter, or the way his Mercedes had folded around the concrete pillar. What he remembered was waking up 3 days later in a hospital room that smelled like industrial cleaning solution and the particular silence that comes right before someone delivers devastating news. His chest worked. His arms responded. Everything below that? Nothing. Just a vast, terrifying absence where his legs used to report for duty. The doctor, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes and a rehearsed gentle voice, explained it in terms that sounded like they'd been designed to soften a blow that couldn't be softened. T6 complete spinal cord injury. Paraplegia. Permanent. The words rolled over him like stones, each one heavier than the last. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came 6 hours later, when the lawyer arrived with papers that still smelled like fresh ink. Mr. Kim, I'm required to inform you that your wife, Ginho Kim, has filed for dissolution of marriage. These are your copies. Ginho stared at the manila folder the way you might stare at a snake that had just appeared in your bed. His hands, still working, trembled as he opened it. Filed 4 days ago. 1 day after the accident. She hadn't even waited for him to wake up. The lawyer's voice continued, professional and distant, explaining that Mrs. Kim had also filed emergency motions to access their joint accounts for immediate living expenses. Ginho's mind, still foggy from painkillers and trauma, struggled to process what that meant. Then his phone, retrieved from the wreckage and placed on his bedside table by some helpful nurse, buzzed with a banking alert. Joint account, $847,362.19 withdrawn. Remaining balance, $1,204.33. His personal savings account, the one only he had access to, was untouched. For now. But the joint account, the one they'd built together over 8 years of marriage, the one that held their life savings, the emergency fund, the money earmarked for the house renovation Ginho had been planning? Gone. Ginho tried to sit up, forgetting for a moment that sitting up now required an entirely different sequence of movements, none of which his body remembered how to execute. He slumped back against the hospital bed, breathing hard, and that's when the full weight of his new reality crashed down. He couldn't walk. He couldn't work. He couldn't even take a piss without help. And his wife had left him before he could say goodbye. The hospital room became a cell. Physical therapy started within days, aggressive, painful, necessary. Therapists came and went with their bright voices and their determined optimism, teaching him how to shift his weight, how to transfer from bed to wheelchair, how to navigate a world that had suddenly become an obstacle course of curbs and narrow doorways and stairs he'd never noticed before. Through it all, his phone stayed silent. No call from Ginho. No text. No explanation. His business partner, Marcus Chin, visited once. The conversation was brief and uncomfortable, filled with the kind of careful language people use when they're trying to figure out if you're still useful. Ginho's company, a commercial real estate firm he'd built from nothing into a $200 million enterprise, was now in Marcus's hands by default. The accident had happened during what was supposed to be a routine site visit. Ginho had been driving alone, reviewing contracts on his phone, not paying attention to the wet roads. His own fault really, or so everyone seemed to imply. Take all the time you need to recover, Marcus said, his hand on the door handle, already leaving. We'll hold down the fort. It sounded supportive. It felt like a threat. Ginho's brother, David, visited twice. The first time, he brought flowers and pity. The second time, he brought papers, a suggested, temporary management structure that would place David in control of Ginho's voting shares until you're back on your feet. The irony of that phrase hung in the air between them. I'm just trying to protect what you built, David said, his voice oozing with fraternal concern that had never existed before. They'd been estranged for 5 years over a business dispute David claimed Ginho had stolen from him. Now, suddenly, brotherhood mattered again. Ginho refused to sign. David left angry. The hospital became a battlefield where Ginho fought his own body and everyone else fought for pieces of his empire. 6 weeks after the accident, Ginho was discharged to a rehabilitation facility. It was supposed to be temporary, a place to continue physical therapy, to learn how to live in his new body, to prepare for whatever came next. What came next was worse. Hygiene reappeared, not in person, but in the form of legal documents. She was filing for conservatorship, claiming Ginho was mentally incompetent to manage his own affairs due to severe depression and potential traumatic brain injury from the accident. Never mind that every neurological test had come back clean. Never mind that Jinho's mind was the only part of him that still worked exactly as it had before. She wanted control, and she'd found doctors willing to say he couldn't be trusted with it. The conservatorship hearing was set for 3 months out. Until then, Ginho existed in a bizarre limbo, legally competent but practically helpless, wealthy on paper but unable to access most of his assets without triggering legal challenges, surrounded by medical professionals who were kind but ultimately didn't give a damn about anything beyond their shift schedules. He was drowning in a sea of paperwork and pity. That's when Naomi arrived. She walked into his room at the rehabilitation facility without knocking, without introducing herself, without any of the gentle bedside manner every other caregiver had employed. She was a black woman in her late 30s, average height, with short natural hair and eyes that looked like they'd seen every brand of bullshit humanity had to offer and weren't impressed by any of it. "You're Ginho Kim," she said. Not a question. "Yes. I'm Naomi. I'll be your primary caregiver starting today. I need you to understand something right now before we go any further. I'm not your friend, I'm not your therapist, and I'm not here to make you feel better about your situation. I'm here to make sure you don't die and, if possible, to help you figure out how to live. Those are 2 different things. You get to choose which one you want." Ginho stared at her. Every other medical professional had approached him with kid gloves, speaking in hushed tones about adjustment periods and emotional processing. This woman was looking at him like he was a particularly annoying problem she'd been assigned to solve. You don't get to finish that sentence with, "need this right now," or, "want to be talked to like that," Naomi interrupted. "Because here's the truth nobody else is going to tell you. You're feeling sorry for yourself, and you think you've earned the right to it. You haven't. Plenty of people have it worse. Plenty of people in this facility have it worse. Your wife left you? Join the club. You can't walk? Neither can I." She said it so matter-of-factly that it took Ginho a moment to process. Then he looked, really looked, and saw the way she moved, the subtle prosthetic visible at her ankle when her pant leg shifted. "Car accident, 7 years ago," Naomi continued, following his gaze. "Broke my back, lost feeling in my left leg, doctor said I'd never walk again. I walk. Not perfectly, not like before, but I walk. You want to know how? I stopped waiting for someone to fix me and started fixing myself. Now, we can spend the next 3 months with you crying into your hospital putting about how unfair life is, or we can get to work. Your choice." It was the first honest thing anyone had said to him since he woke up in the hospital. "Get to work," Ginho said quietly. Naomi nodded once. "Good. We start tomorrow at 6 a.m. Don't be late to your own life." She left without another word, and for the first time since the accident, Ginho felt something other than despair. He felt angry. And anger, it turned out, was something he could use. Naomi wasn't joking about 6 a.m. She arrived at exactly 5:58, knocked once on his door, and walked in regardless of whether he responded. Ginho had barely slept. His body still ached in ways he was learning to identify and categorize, phantom sensations mixing with real pain in a cocktail of confusion, but Naomi didn't care about his sleep schedule. "Up," she said, pulling open the curtains with a sharp snap that let morning light flood the room. "We're doing transfers today. Then range of motion. Then we're having a conversation about your legal situation, because those vultures circling you aren't going to wait for you to feel ready." The routine was brutal. Not physically, though it was that too, but mentally. Naomi had a gift for identifying exactly where Ginho was hiding from himself and dragging him into the light. "You're doing it wrong," she said, watching him struggle to shift his weight from bed to wheelchair. "You're trying to use your legs. They don't work. Stop pretending they're going to help and use what does work. Your arms, your core, your brain." "I know they don't work," Ginho snapped. "Then act like it. You keep hesitating, waiting for them to engage. That pause? That's going to get you hurt. Commit to the movement or don't move at all." She was right. He hated that she was right. Over the following weeks, the pattern became clear. Naomi pushed, Ginho resisted, Naomi pushed harder, Ginho either broke through or broke down. There was no middle ground with her. She didn't believe in gentle encouragement or positive affirmations. She believed in reality, delivered without garnish. "Your wife took your money," she said one morning while helping him through stretching exercises. "What are you going to do about it?" "I have a lawyer." "Your lawyer is taking your money too." "Everyone's taking your money, Ginho, because you're lying here letting them. When are you going to fight back?" "I am fighting back." "No, you're surviving. There's a difference. Surviving is passive. Fighting requires a plan." She bent his knee, or rather, moved his leg through the motion his body could no longer perform on its own, and met his eyes. "So what's your plan?" He didn't have one. That was the problem. The conservatorship hearing loomed like a storm on the horizon. Hygiene's legal team, funded by what used to be his money, was building a case painted in sympathetic colors. A devoted wife trying to protect her incapacitated husband from making rash decisions during a mental health crisis. They'd found a psychiatrist willing to testify that Ginho exhibited signs of depression and cognitive impairment. Of course he was depressed. His life had exploded. But that didn't make him incompetent. Ginho's lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia who specialized in disability rights, was good. But she was fighting an uphill battle against public perception and a legal system that often assumed disability meant inability. "They're going to put you through a psychiatric evaluation," Patricia explained during one of her visits. "It's going to be invasive, uncomfortable, and designed to make you look unstable. You need to stay calm, stay coherent, and demonstrate that you understand your financial situation and can make rational decisions about it." "I can do that." "Can you?" "Because right now, Ginho, you look like a man who's given up. The judge is going to see that. Hygiene's team is going to use that. You need to show up to that hearing looking like someone who has his shit together, even if you don't." Naomi was in the room for that conversation. After Patricia left, she turned to Ginho with an expression he was beginning to recognize. It meant she was about to say something he wouldn't want to hear. "She's right. You look defeated. It's written all over you. Every therapist, every doctor, every visitor who comes through here sees it. You know what they're thinking? They're thinking, that poor man. His life is over." "Maybe it is," Ginho said bitterly. "Then Hygiene wins. Your brother wins. Marcus wins. Everyone who wants a piece of you gets exactly what they want, and you get to spend the rest of your life in a chair feeling sorry for yourself. Is that what you want?" "Of course not." "Then stop acting like it. You want to know what I see when I look at you? I see a man with working arms, working brain, and more money than God, even after your wife robbed you, who's choosing to be helpless." "You're not helpless, Ginho. You're lazy." It should have made him angry. Instead, it made him laugh, a bitter, exhausted sound that surprised them both. "Lazy," he repeated. "Yes. Lazy. It's easier to give up than to rebuild. It's easier to let them take control than to fight for it. It's easier to believe your life is over than to figure out what comes next. But easy doesn't mean right." Something shifted in that moment. Not dramatically, there was no sudden epiphany, no inspiring music playing in the background of reality. But Ginho felt something harden inside him, like metal cooling after being forged. "Teach me," he said. "Teach you what?" "How to fight back. How to rebuild. How to not be lazy." Naomi studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "But it's going to hurt, and you're going to hate me sometimes, and there will be days when you think I'm being cruel instead of honest. Can you handle that?" "I don't have a choice." "Wrong answer. You always have a choice. The question is what you're willing to sacrifice to make the right one." They started that afternoon. Naomi brought in financial documents, everything Patricia had provided about the conservatorship case, the divorce proceedings, the state of Ginho's business holdings. She spread them across his bed like a battle map. "Walk me through it," she said. "Not the emotional parts. The facts. What does Hygiene want, what does she need to get it, and where is she vulnerable?" It took hours. Ginho's brain, sharp as ever despite what Hygiene's doctors claimed, began to re-engage with the machinery of his life. He'd been avoiding it, letting Patricia handle everything, but Naomi was right. He'd been lazy, passive, waiting for someone else to save him. The conservatorship case rested on 3 pillars: medical testimony about his mental state, financial evidence of impaired decision-making, and character witnesses who would testify about his supposed decline. They don't have any real financial evidence, Ginho realized, studying the documents. "I haven't made any impaired decisions because I haven't made any decisions at all. Everything's been frozen pending the hearing." "So they're going to manufacture it," Naomi said. They're going to point to your withdrawal from the business, your lack of engagement, your isolation as evidence that you can't function. They're going to make your grief look like incompetence. How do I prove I'm competent? By being competent. By showing up. By engaging with your life instead of hiding from it. She tapped the papers. Your business. When's the last time you talked to anyone there besides Marcus? I can't run the company from a hospital bed. Why not? You have a phone. You have a laptop. You have a working brain. Start running the company. Force them to include you. Make decisions, send emails, call meetings. Show everyone that being in a wheelchair didn't turn off your mind. It was obvious once she said it. Ginho had been so focused on what he'd lost, mobility, independence, his marriage, that he'd stopped using what remained. His mind was intact. His business acumen hadn't been damaged. He could still read contracts, analyze deals, direct strategy. He just had to choose to do it. That night, Ginho sent his first email to the company in 6 weeks. It was short, direct, and professional, requesting a full briefing on all pending deals and announcing his intention to resume active oversight of major decisions. Marcus responded within an hour, "Take all the time you need. We have everything under control." Translation, "Stay out of the way." Ginho's response was even shorter. Monday, 9 a.m., video conference. I want full reports from every department head. Non-negotiable. He hit send before he could second-guess himself. Naomi, reading over his shoulder, smiled for the first time since they'd met. "Now you're fighting," she said. But the battles were just beginning. 2 days later, Ginho's brother David showed up unannounced, accompanied by Marcus Chen. The meeting was clearly coordinated, another sign that the vultures were working together. "We need to talk about the company's future," Marcus began, settling into the chair across from Ginho's bed with the ease of someone who'd already decided how the conversation would end. "I agree," Ginho said. "I'm resuming active management immediately, starting with a full audit of all decisions made in my absence." David's expression flickered. "Ginho, be reasonable. You're in a rehabilitation facility. You can barely... I can think. I can read. I can make decisions. Those are the skills that built this company, and they're the skills that will continue to run it. What I can't do is walk. That's irrelevant to my job." "The board is concerned," Marcus interjected smoothly. "They feel that the company needs stable, present leadership. Not someone managing from a hospital bed." "Then I'll manage from somewhere else. I'm being discharged next month. I'll run things from home if necessary." "With all due respect," David said, leaning forward with artificial concern plastered on his face, "you don't have a home. You're getting divorced, remember? Hygiene gets the house." Ginho had forgotten that detail. The house, their house, the place he'd lived for 5 years, was marital property. Hygiene would almost certainly get it in the divorce settlement. Naomi, standing by the window where she'd been quietly observing, spoke up for the first time. "He'll figure out housing. That's not your concern. What is your concern is whether you're here to support him or to replace him." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "And you are. Someone who actually gives a damn whether he lives or dies. What's your excuse?" The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "I think we're done here," Ginho said quietly. "Marcus, I'll see you Monday at 9. David, unless you have something constructive to offer, don't come back." They left, but not before David paused at the door. "You're making a mistake, little brother. You're not thinking clearly. When Hygiene gets that conservatorship, maybe it'll be for the best." After they'd gone, Ginho sat in silence, his hands trembling with anger and exhaustion. "They're working with her," he said finally. "Marcus and David. They're all working with Hygiene. Of course they are. She controls you, they control the company. It's not complicated." Naomi moved to his bedside, her expression serious. "You need to understand something, Ginho. This isn't just a legal battle. It's a war. And in war, you need to know who your real enemies are and who your allies are. Right now, you don't have many allies. I have Patricia. Your lawyer is a paid professional. That's different. I'm talking about people who care whether you win or lose beyond what it means for their paycheck." "I have you," Ginho said, surprising himself with the admission. Naomi was quiet for a moment. Then, "You do. But I need you to understand why." "Why what? Why I'm doing this? Why I give a damn when nobody else does?" She pulled up a chair, and for the first time since they'd met, her armor dropped slightly. 7 years ago, I was in a car accident that broke my back. My fiancé, the man I was supposed to marry in 3 months, Left me while I was still in the ICU. Couldn't handle it. Couldn't handle me being broken. I spent 2 years in physical therapy, learning to walk again, learning to live again. And the whole time, everyone around me treated me like I was fragile. Like I'd shatter if they told me the truth. What truth? That he wasn't coming back. That my old life was gone. That I had to build a new one from scratch. They all lied to me or avoided me or pitted me. Except for one person, my physical therapist, a man named Marcus. She smiled sadly. Different Marcus. He was brutal and honest, and he pushed me until I wanted to scream. But he never lied to me. He never treated me like I was made of glass. And he saved my life, not by fixing me, but by refusing to let me give up. Where is he now? Dead. Heart attack 2 years ago. But before he died, he made me promise something, that I'd do for others what he did for me. That I'd tell the truth even when it hurt. That I'd push even when it seemed cruel. That I'd never let someone drown in their own pity when they could swim if they just tried. Ginho felt something crack open in his chest. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be better. That's what he'd say. Don't waste your life feeling sorry for what you lost. Build something with what remains. She stood up, the armor sliding back into place. Now we have 3 weeks until your hearing. Between now and then, you're going to prove to everyone, yourself included, that you're not incompetent. You're going to run your company, you're going to handle your legal case, and you're going to show up to that courtroom looking like a man who has his shit together. Understood? Understood. Good. Because if hygiene wins, everything you built, everything you are, disappears. And I didn't waste 7 years learning to walk again just to watch you roll over and die. It was the first time anyone had put it that bluntly. It was also the first time Ginho truly believed he might survive this. The conservatorship hearing was scheduled for a Thursday in October. The 3 weeks leading up to it felt like preparing for an execution where Ginho was both the condemned and the only witness for the defense. Patricia had been clear about what was coming. Hygiene's legal team would paint him as mentally unstable, financially reckless, and unable to manage his own affairs. They would use his depression, which was real and documented, as evidence of cognitive decline. They would point to his withdrawal from his business as proof of incompetence. They would bring character witnesses who would testify, with great sympathy, that poor Ginho Kim simply wasn't the same man anymore. The key, Patricia explained during their prep sessions, is to demonstrate 3 things. You understand your financial situation, you can articulate rational plans for your future, and you're actively engaged in managing your life and business. We need to show the judge that you're not a victim who needs saving, you're a person who's adapting to changed circumstances. Ginho threw himself into preparation with an intensity that bordered on obsession. He reconnected with every department head at his company, reviewed every major contract and deal in the pipeline, and made strategic decisions that reminded everyone why he'd built a $200 million enterprise in the first place. The Monday morning video conference he demanded became a regular occurrence. Marcus showed up to the first one with visible irritation, clearly expecting Ginho to fumble or reveal his supposed incompetence. Instead, Ginho dissected their Q3 numbers with the precision of a surgeon, identified 3 deals that should have been flagged for his approval but weren't, and redirected strategy on a major commercial development that Marcus had been mismanaging. The Riverside project is hemorrhaging money because you're using the wrong contractor, Ginho said, his voice calm but firm. I want a full cost analysis by tomorrow, and I want to know why I wasn't consulted before you signed that contract. Marcus's face went through several interesting expressions. You were unavailable. I was in a hospital, not a coma. And I wasn't unavailable today, or last week, or at any point in the last month when I've been sending you emails that you've been ignoring. So let me be clear, I'm back. Whether you like it or not, whether it's convenient or not, I'm running this company again. If you can't work with that, we can discuss your exit package. The silence on the video call was deafening. After the meeting, Naomi, who'd been listening from outside the camera frame, gave him a slow nod of approval. That's how you do it, she said. Now do it for everything else in your life. But while Ginho was rebuilding his professional persona, Hygiene's team was building their case. The psychiatric evaluation came on a rainy Wednesday, 2 weeks before the hearing. The psychiatrist, Dr. Ellen Reeves, a stern woman with gray hair and the kind of clipboard that seemed to contain judgments already written, spent 3 hours asking questions designed to reveal cognitive impairment, emotional instability, or evidence of poor judgment. Mr. Kim, can you tell me what year it is? 2025. And who is the current president? Donald Trump. The words tasted bitter, but facts were facts. Can you count backwards from 100 by sevens? Ginho did, flawlessly while maintaining eye contact. How would you describe your emotional state since the accident? Realistic. I'm adjusting to permanent physical changes while dealing with betrayal by people I trusted. I'm angry, I'm grieving what I've lost, and I'm determined to build what comes next. Those are appropriate emotional responses to my circumstances, not evidence of instability. Dr. Reeves made notes without expression. The questioning continued: memory tests, logic puzzles, questions about his financial understanding, hypothetical scenarios about business decisions. Ginho answered everything with careful precision, aware that every word would be analyzed for evidence of impairment. Do you feel your wife was wrong to leave you? Dr. Reeves asked, her pen poised. It was a trap. Express too much anger, he'd look bitter and potentially vindictive. Express too little, he'd look disconnected from reality. I feel my wife was dishonest, Ginho said carefully. She left while I was unconscious and took our savings without discussion or warning. That's a factual statement, not an emotional one. Whether she was wrong is a moral judgment I'm not interested in making. I'm interested in moving forward with my life. Do you think you're capable of managing your financial affairs? I think I've been managing a multi-million-dollar company successfully for the last 2 weeks while simultaneously preparing for this evaluation. So yes, I'm capable. The evaluation ended without any clear indication of how it had gone. Dr. Reeves thanked him for his time and left with her clipboard full of notes that would either save him or destroy him. How'd it go? Naomi asked afterward. I have no idea. She had a perfect poker face. Then assume you did fine and move on. Worrying about it won't change anything. But 2 days later, Patricia called with bad news. Dr. Reeves's report came back. She's not testifying that you're incompetent, which is good. But she's also not testifying that you're clearly competent. She's saying your emotional state is complicated and that there are legitimate concerns about your decision-making capacity. It's neutral enough that the judge could interpret it either way. So we're back where we started. Not quite. Hygiene's team is also bringing in Dr. Martin Cross. He's the psychiatrist who saw you once in the hospital, right after the accident, when you were heavily medicated and in shock. He's going to testify about how significantly impaired you were then and suggest that's ongoing. That was 6 weeks ago. I was drugged and traumatized. I know. We'll point that out. But juries and judges remember the image. We need to counter it with something strong. That's when Naomi made her suggestion. Bring me in as a witness, she said. You. Ginho looked at her, confused. You're my caregiver. They'll say you're biased. Of course I'm biased. But I'm also the person who's seen you every day for the last month. I've watched you rebuild your ability to function. I've seen you run a company from a hospital bed. I've seen you do the work. She met his eyes. And I'm credible. I'm a medical professional. I understand disability because I live it. Let me tell them what I've seen. Patricia was skeptical at first, but eventually agreed. It's risky. They'll attack her credibility, question her objectivity. But if she can hold up under cross-examination, it might be our strongest character testimony. The final week before the hearing was a blur of preparation. Ginho continued his video conferences, demonstrating his competence. Patricia drilled him on potential questions. Naomi practiced her testimony, working on how to convey the truth without sounding defensive or biased. And then, the night before the hearing, Hygiene made her move. She released a statement to the press. Ginho learned about it from a notification on his phone, a news alert that made his stomach drop. Ginho Kim speaks out. I'm fighting for my husband's future. The article contained everything designed to paint her as a sympathetic figure. Her tearful description of watching Ginho withdraw into darkness after the accident. Her claims that she'd been forced to file for conservatorship to protect him from predatory people trying to take advantage. Her insistence that she still loved him and only wanted what was best. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. There were photos. Hygiene looking exhausted and worried, dramatically gesturing while she spoke to reporters, her eyes red-rimmed as if from crying. The comments section was predictably supportive. This poor woman is trying to help her husband and people are demonizing her. He's clearly not in his right mind. Someone needs to protect him. She's so brave for fighting for him even after everything. Ginho read the article 3 times, feeling fury build in his chest like pressure in a sealed container. She's playing the victim, he said when Naomi arrived for their morning session. She robbed me, abandoned me, and now she's telling the world she's doing it out of love. Of course she is. It's a smart strategy. Now the judge is going to walk into that hearing with this narrative in their head. We need to break it. How? By telling the truth. Loudly, clearly, and with evidence. Patricia has the financial records showing when she drained your accounts. The timeline makes it impossible to claim she was acting in your best interest. We have the divorce filing date. We have the fact that she never visited you, never called, never showed any actual concern for your well-being. The story she's selling doesn't match the facts. We just need to make sure the judge sees that. The hearing was held in a courthouse that had been built without accessibility in mind. Ginho had to enter through a side entrance, navigate a service elevator, and wheel through hallways clearly designed for people who could walk. It was fitting, in a way. The system itself wasn't built for him. The courtroom was smaller than he'd expected, formal but not grand. Hygiene sat at the plaintiff's table with her legal team, 3 lawyers in expensive suits. She dressed carefully for the occasion, conservative but stylish, makeup subtle, her expression composed and sad. She didn't look at Ginho once. His side of the courtroom felt emptier. Patricia, himself, and Naomi, who would testify later. That was it. Judge Martha Holloway presided, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd heard every manipulation tactic known to humanity and wasn't impressed by any of them. Hygiene's team went first, and they were good. They called Dr. Cross, who testified about Ginho's state immediately after the accident, disoriented, medicated, emotionally volatile. They carefully avoided mentioning that those were normal reactions to trauma and heavy painkillers. They called Marcus Chen, who testified, with great reluctance that seemed rehearsed, that Ginho had withdrawn from the business and wasn't responding to communications, conveniently omitting that this had changed dramatically in recent weeks. They called David Kim, who spoke with brotherly concern about Ginho's refusal to accept help and irrational anger toward family members trying to assist him. Then they called Hygiene herself. She was perfect. Her voice trembled at exactly the right moments. Her eyes filled with tears, not enough to seem theatrical, just enough to seem genuine. She described how difficult it had been to watch the man she loved disappear into depression, how she'd tried to help but he'd pushed her away, how she'd made the impossible decision to file for conservatorship because she couldn't bear to watch him destroy everything he'd built. "I still love him," she said, dabbing at her eyes. "I'm not trying to take anything from him. I'm trying to protect him. That's all I've ever wanted to do." It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. Patricia's cross-examination was surgical. "Mrs. Kim, when did you file for divorce?" "October 3rd. "And when did the accident occur?" "October 2nd. "So you filed for divorce the day after your husband was paralyzed?" "It wasn't like that. I filed because I knew he'd need someone with clear legal standing to manage his affairs." "But you didn't file for conservatorship then. You filed for divorce. In that divorce filing, you requested division of assets, including withdrawing money from joint accounts. Is that correct?" Hygiene hesitated. "I needed to secure our finances." "You withdrew $847,000 from your joint account while your husband was unconscious in a hospital bed. Is that securing finances or taking them?" "Your Honor, this line of questioning is inflammatory," Hygiene's lawyer objected. "Sustained." Ms. Patricia rephrase. "Mrs. Kim, how many times did you visit your husband in the hospital after the accident?" The silence stretched. "It was complicated." "How many times?" "I didn't. I couldn't, it was too painful." "You couldn't visit your husband, the man you claim to still love, even once while he was in the hospital recovering from an accident that left him paralyzed?" "Objection. Withdrawn." Patricia consulted her notes. "Mrs. Kim, you testified that you're trying to protect your husband. Can you explain why, if you're trying to protect him, you've hired 3 lawyers and a psychiatrist rather than, say, visiting him or asking him what he needs?" The cross-examination continued for another 30 minutes, each question carefully dismantling Hygiene's narrative of the concerned, loving wife. By the end, her composure was cracking. Then it was Ginho's turn to testify. He wheeled himself to the witness stand. Patricia had insisted he do it without help, demonstrating his independence, and placed his hand on the Bible for swearing in. Patricia walked him through the timeline. The accident, waking up to divorce papers, discovering his accounts had been drained, rebuilding his business involvement. "Mr. Kim, do you believe you're capable of managing your own affairs?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because I've been doing exactly that for the last month. I've been running my company, making strategic decisions, engaging with clients and partners. The only thing that's changed is that I'm doing it from a wheelchair instead of an office. My mind works exactly as it did before. My judgment is sound. The only people questioning my competence are people who benefit from taking control of my assets. Hygiene's lawyer's cross-examination was aggressive. Mr. Kim, isn't it true that you've been diagnosed with clinical depression? I've been experiencing depression as a normal response to trauma and betrayal. My therapist has confirmed this is an expected reaction, not a cognitive impairment. Isn't it true that you've been isolated in a rehabilitation facility? I've been in a rehabilitation facility learning to function in my new circumstances. That's not isolation, that's recovery. Isn't it true that you were heavily medicated after the accident? For pain management, yes. I'm no longer on those medications. Mr. Kim, your wife testified that you pushed her away. Is that accurate? My wife filed for divorce while I was unconscious and robbed me while I couldn't stop her. I didn't push her away, she left before I had a chance to. The questions continued, but Ginho held firm. Every attempt to paint him as impaired or unstable bounced off the simple facts. He was functioning, he was competent, and he was capable. Then Naomi took the stand. She was sworn in and seated, and Patricia began her questioning. Ms. Washington, what is your relationship to Mr. Kim? I'm his primary caregiver and physical therapist. How long have you worked with him? 5 weeks. In that time, have you observed any cognitive impairment or inability to make decisions? No. Just the opposite. I've watched him adapt to enormous challenges with intelligence and determination. He's learned new physical skills, managed complex business operations, and navigated a hostile legal situation, all while recovering from a traumatic injury. If anything, he's more capable than most fully abled people I know. Can you speak to his mental state? He's appropriately angry about being betrayed. He's grieving what he's lost. But he's not impaired. He's not incompetent. He's responding rationally to an irrational situation. Hygiene's lawyer's cross-examination focused on undermining Naomi's objectivity. Ms. Washington, you're being paid by Mr. Kim, correct? I'm paid by the rehabilitation facility. Mr. Kim is a patient. But you have a personal interest in his success? I have a professional interest in his recovery and a personal belief that people shouldn't be declared incompetent just because they're disabled. If that's bias, yes, I'm biased. You yourself have a disability, is that correct? Yes. So you might be more inclined to give Mr. Kim the benefit of the doubt? Or I might be more qualified to assess whether disability equals inability. I walk with a prosthetic. Should I be declared incompetent? Or does disability only mean incompetence when it's convenient for people trying to steal someone's assets? Objection. Sustained. Ms. Washington, please limit your answers to the questions asked. But the point had been made. The hearing concluded with closing arguments. Hygiene's team painted a picture of a grieving wife trying to save a broken man. Patricia painted a picture of opportunistic vultures trying to seize control of a capable person's life because he'd lost the ability to walk. Judge Holloway took it all under advisement and said she'd render a decision within a week. Ginho left the courthouse exhausted, drained, and uncertain. How do you think it went? He asked Patricia on the courthouse steps. I think we did everything we could. Now we wait. The waiting was agony. Ginho returned to the rehabilitation facility, but his mind was elsewhere. He continued his business meetings, maintained his routines, but everything felt suspended, his entire future hanging on a decision being made in a judge's chamber somewhere. Naomi kept him moving, kept him working, kept him from drowning in anxiety. Whatever happens, happens, she said. You did your part. You showed up, you told the truth, you fought. That's all you can control. For days later, Patricia called. We won. Ginho's hands started shaking. What? Judge Holloway denied the conservatorship petition. She said, and I quote, "The petitioner has failed to demonstrate any evidence of cognitive impairment beyond normal grief responses to trauma. Mr. Kim has shown himself to be capable of managing his affairs and making rational decisions about his life and business. The court finds no basis for restricting his autonomy." Ginho couldn't speak. Ginho? Are you there? I'm here. I can't believe it. Believe it? You're free. She can't control you. The conservatorship is denied. After he hung up, Ginho sat in his room in silence, feeling the weight of the last 2 months begin to lift. He wasn't free from everything. The divorce was still ongoing, the battle with his brother and Marcus still loomed, but he'd won the most important fight. He'd proven he was still himself. Naomi found him an hour later, still sitting there. "I heard," she said. "Congratulations. Thank you. For everything. I couldn't have done this without you." "Yes, you could have. You just would have taken longer and been more annoying about it." She smiled, a real smile, not the professional mask she usually wore. "So what's next?" "Next, I finish the divorce, take back my company, and figure out what my life looks like now." "Sounds like a plan. You need help?" "Yes. If you're willing to keep working with me." "I'm willing. But Ginho." She met his eyes. "At some point, you need to stop just surviving and start actually living. Winning legal battles is important, but it's not the same as building a life." "I know. I'm working on it." "Work faster. Life's too short to spend it in a war you've already won." She left him to think about that. And as Ginho sat there in his wheelchair, in a rehabilitation facility room that had become both prison and sanctuary, he realized she was right. He'd won the battle. Now he had to figure out what came next. The divorce proceedings moved with the cold efficiency of a machine designed to dismantle marriages. 3 months after the conservatorship victory, Ginho and Hygiene signed papers dividing 8 years of shared life into columns of assets and debts. She kept the house. He kept the business. She got half of their joint savings, what little remained after her initial raid. He got his freedom. The final hearing was brief. Hygiene appeared with her lawyers but didn't testify. Ginho suspected her team had advised against putting her on the stand again after her conservatorship testimony had been shredded. Instead, they negotiated through lawyers, both sides eager to end it. When the judge declared them officially divorced, Hygiene stood, smoothed her dress, and walked out without looking back. Ginho felt nothing. Not relief, not anger, not even sadness. Just the hollow sensation of watching a chapter close that should have ended differently. "How do you feel?" Patricia asked afterward. "Like I should feel more than I do." "That's normal. Grief isn't linear. Sometimes the real feelings hit later, when you're not braced for them." But Ginho had other battles to fight. Marcus Chen had been quietly maneuvering during the conservatorship and divorce proceedings, using Jinho's distraction to consolidate power within the company. By the time Ginho refocused on the business, Marcus had positioned himself as the de facto CEO, with the board's informal support. The confrontation came during a board meeting Ginho attended via video conference from his new apartment, a ground floor, fully accessible unit he'd purchased after being discharged from the rehabilitation facility. "I'm calling for a vote on formal leadership structure," Marcus announced, his image on Ginho's screen showing carefully rehearsed confidence. "Given the changes in Ginho's circumstances, I believe the company needs clearer direction." "You mean you want to officially replace me?" Ginho said. "I mean the company needs a CEO who can be physically present, who can travel to sites, who can engage with clients face-to-face. You've done an admirable job adapting, Ginho, but there are practical limitations we can't ignore." "Name one deal I've lost since the accident." Marcus hesitated. "It's not about specific deals. Name one decision I've made that hurt the company." "You're being defensive." "I'm being specific. You want my job, Marcus, but you can't articulate a single reason beyond the fact that I'm in a wheelchair. That's not a business case, that's discrimination." The other board members shifted uncomfortably in their video squares. One of them, Teresa Grant, a venture capitalist who'd backed Ginho's first major development, spoke up. "Marcus, I have to agree with Ginho. The numbers have actually improved since he returned to active management. The Riverside project you were handling was losing money until Ginho course-corrected. I don't see a performance-based reason for this change." "I second that," another board member added. "Ginho built this company. He's still building it. Unless there's evidence he can't do the job, I don't see why we're having this conversation." Marcus's carefully constructed case crumbled in real time. By the end of the meeting, not only had his bid for CEO failed, but 2 board members had privately suggested to Ginho that perhaps Marcus's role needed to be re-evaluated. Ginho declined. "He's good at his job when he's not trying to steal mine. Keep him, but make it clear where the boundaries are." "You're being generous," Teresa said. "I'm being practical. Firing him causes drama and disruption. Managing him keeps the company stable. I'm not interested in revenge. I'm interested in success." But Marcus wasn't finished. 2 weeks later, Ginho's brother David made his move, a lawsuit claiming that Ginho had stolen business opportunities that rightfully belonged to David years earlier. It was baseless, but it was public, and it was designed to damage Ginho's reputation and create enough legal headaches to distract him from running the company. He's doing this because the conservatorship failed, Patricia explained. He thought hygiene would win, he'd get control of your assets through her, and everything would work out. Now he's plan B, throw enough legal mud to force a settlement. I'm not settling. But, because we can win this. But it'll take time and energy. It was during this period, buried under legal battles, business challenges, and the daily work of rebuilding his life, that Ginho realized something had changed between him and Naomi. She'd officially transitioned from caregiver to physical therapist as Ginho moved into his apartment, coming 3 times a week to work on strength, flexibility, and mobility skills. But their sessions had evolved beyond professional exercises into something more complicated. They talked during workouts, about the legal cases, about business decisions, about the small frustrations and victories of daily life. Naomi had a gift for cutting through his bullshit, forcing him to confront things he wanted to avoid. You're still angry at hygiene, she said one morning while helping him through core exercises. Of course I am. But you're not dealing with it. You're compartmentalizing, putting it in a box labeled, handled, because the legal case is over. That's not the same as processing it. What's there to process? She betrayed me. I survived. I moved on. Did you? Because from where I'm sitting, you've replaced one fight with another. First it was the conservatorship, then the divorce, then Marcus, now your brother. You're always in battle mode. When do you actually grieve what you lost? I don't have time to grieve. That's what everyone says right before they break. The conversation haunted him. Naomi was right. He'd been running from his emotions, using legal and business battles as shields against actually feeling the enormity of what had happened to him. That night, alone in his apartment, Ginho let himself cry for the first time since the accident. Not the quiet, controlled tears he'd shed in the hospital, but deep, wrenching sobs that left him exhausted and empty. He cried for his legs, for the life he'd lost, for the marriage that had shattered, for the betrayals that had come from all sides. He cried until there was nothing left, and then he sat in the silence of his apartment, feeling oddly lighter. The next morning, Naomi arrived for their session and took one look at him. You look like hell. I took your advice. I grieved. But how do you feel? Terrible. And better. That's usually how it works. She set down her equipment. You ready to work? Always. But their dynamic was shifting in ways neither of them acknowledged directly. The conversations got longer. The silences got more comfortable. Naomi started staying after sessions, sitting at his kitchen table with coffee while they talked about things that had nothing to do with physical therapy. Ginho found himself looking forward to her visits in ways that had nothing to do with exercise and everything to do with just wanting her there. It was Naomi who finally addressed it, 3 months after the divorce was finalized. We need to talk about what's happening here, she said, setting down her coffee cup with the kind of directness that was quintessentially her. What do you mean? You know what I mean. This, she gestured between them, has stopped being a professional relationship. We're friends now, at minimum. Maybe more than friends. And we need to decide if that's something we're okay with or if we need boundaries. Jinho's heart was suddenly beating faster. What do you want? I asked you first. I want. He took a breath. I want more than friendship. But I don't know if that's appropriate given how we met, given that you were my caregiver. Past tense. I'm not your caregiver anymore. I'm your physical therapist, and honestly, you don't even need me for that anymore. You're mobile, you're independent, you're functional. You're keeping me around for other reasons. Yes, I am. So say it clearly. What do you want? I want you. In my life, as more than a friend or therapist. I want. He stopped, frustrated with his inability to articulate what he was feeling. I don't know how to do this. The last time I tried to build something with someone, she left me when I needed her most. I don't know how to trust this. Naomi was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'm not hygiene. I don't run when things get hard. That's literally the opposite of who I am. But I need you to understand something. If we do this, if we try to build something together, it can't be because you're grateful or because I'm convenient or because you need someone to prove hygiene was wrong. It has to be because you actually want me, specifically, for who I am. I do. I want you because you're honest and fierce and you don't take my bullshit. I want you because you make me better. I want you because when you walk into a room, everything feels less impossible. Okay then. She smiled, a real, unguarded smile that made his chest ache. Let's try this. But slowly. And honestly. And if it doesn't work, we admit it before it becomes a disaster. Agreed. They started dating in the way people do when they've already been through a war together, with a depth and intensity that bypassed typical early relationship awkwardness. They already knew each other's worst moments. Everything else felt easy by comparison. But the outside world wasn't done with them yet. 6 months after the divorce, Ginho resurfaced, not in person, but through a very public breakdown documented on social media. She posted a series of increasingly unhinged messages claiming that Ginho had destroyed her life, that she'd been manipulated by lawyers, that she'd made mistakes but loved him and wanted him back. The posts went viral, sparking debates about disability, divorce, and whether Ginho was a victim or a villain. Ginho's phone exploded with notifications. News outlets requested interviews. Social media dissected every aspect of the story. His private pain became public entertainment. She's trying to rewrite the narrative, Patricia explained during an emergency call. She knows she lost in court, so she's trying to win in public opinion. If she can paint herself as the regretful ex-wife who made mistakes but truly loved you, she can maybe salvage her reputation and potentially set up another legal challenge. Can she do that? Not easily. But she can make your life hell in the process. Naomi's response was more direct. She's manipulating you. Different method, same goal, control. You need to decide if you're going to let her. Ginho knew she was right. Every response he made would feed the story. Every silence would be interpreted as guilt or vindication depending on the audience. He was trapped in a narrative war he didn't want to fight. He decided on a single, definitive response. He posted a statement on his company's website, not on social media, not through tabloids, but on his own platform. My ex-wife and I are divorced. The legal proceedings are complete. I wish her well and ask that the public respect both of our privacy as we move forward with our separate lives. I will not be commenting further on personal matters. It was polite, final, and gave no ammunition for further drama. The media frenzy continued for another week, then faded as new scandals emerged. Ginho's posts became less frequent, then stopped entirely. Ginho later learned she'd moved to another state, apparently trying to start over somewhere her story wasn't already known. He felt no satisfaction in her departure, just relief that it was finally, truly over. 1 year after the accident, Ginho stood at a podium, actually stood, supported by leg braces and crutches and sheer determination, at the groundbreaking ceremony for the Phoenix Center. It was his new project, born from conversations with Naomi about what the world needed. A rehabilitation facility that treated disabled people with dignity, that focused on autonomy rather than pity, that provided comprehensive support without stripping away agency. The center would offer physical therapy, occupational therapy, mental health services, legal aid, financial counseling, and job training, everything Ginho wished he'd had in one place when his world fell apart. Naomi stood beside him, officially as the center's director of rehabilitation services, unofficially as his partner in building something meaningful from the wreckage. This center exists because people like us deserve better, Ginho said into the microphone, his voice steady despite the physical strain of standing. We deserve to be treated as capable, complex human beings who are adapting to changed circumstances, not as broken things that need to be managed or controlled. The Phoenix Center will be a place where disability doesn't equal inability, where support doesn't equal control, and where everyone who walks, or wheels, through our doors is treated with the dignity and autonomy they deserve. The applause was warm, genuine. In the crowd, Ginho saw Teresa and other board members who'd supported him, Patricia who'd fought for him, and former patients from the rehabilitation facility where he'd first met Naomi. What he didn't see were the people who'd tried to break him. Marcus had left the company 6 months earlier after the board finally agreed his position was untenable. David's lawsuit had been dismissed with prejudice and cost him more in legal fees than he'd ever have gained. Ginho was simply gone. They'd all moved on or been moved aside. Life had continued without them. After the ceremony, Ginho and Naomi returned to his apartment. Their apartment, really, since she'd been staying there more often than not for the past few months. The leg braces came off with relief, and Ginho settled into his wheelchair with the kind of ease that came from a year of practice. You did good today, Naomi said, bringing him water. We did good. This is as much yours as mine. True. But you're the one who put his name on the building. That takes courage. Or ego. Both. But mostly courage. She sat beside him, her hand finding his. I'm proud of you. Not just for the center, but for everything. For surviving, for fighting, for choosing to build something instead of just winning. I learned from the best. You're damn right you did. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set through the apartment windows. A year ago, Ginho's life had ended in a car crash and a hospital bed. Now, it was beginning again, different than before, harder in some ways, better in others. "What are you thinking about?" Naomi asked. "About how this isn't the life I planned. But it's the life I have. And it's pretty good." "Just pretty good?" "Okay, it's better than pretty good. It's actually good. Strange and challenging and nothing like I expected, but good. That's growth right there. Will you marry me?" The words came out before Ginho fully realized he was going to say them. Naomi turned to look at him, eyes wide. "What? Marry me? Not because I need you or because I'm grateful or because I'm trying to prove something, but because I love you and I want to build this life with you. All of it. The Phoenix Center, the challenges, the victories, the everyday ordinary moments. I want all of it with you." Naomi was quiet for so long that Ginho started to panic. Then she smiled, that same unguarded smile that had made him fall in love with her in the first place. "Yes. But on one condition. Anything. We do it our way. No big production, no spectacle, no proving anything to anyone. Just us, choosing each other, building something honest. Deal." They married 6 months later in a small ceremony at the Phoenix Center, surrounded by the people who'd helped them survive and rebuild. Ginho stood for the vows, supported by Brace's and Naomi's hand, but standing, because it mattered to him to meet her at that moment as equals. When the officiant pronounced them married and Ginho kissed his wife, he felt something click into place that had been broken since the accident. Not his spine, that would never heal, but something deeper, his sense of self, his understanding of what mattered. He'd lost his legs, his first marriage, his naive belief that loyalty was guaranteed. He'd gained autonomy, resilience, and a partner who saw him as whole even when he felt broken. The Phoenix Center opened 6 months after the wedding, on a cold January morning exactly 2 years after Ginho's accident. The facility was state-of-the-art, accessible, and designed with input from dozens of disabled people who'd shared their experiences of what traditional rehabilitation facilities got wrong. The waiting list filled up within a month. Ginho and Naomi split their time between running the center and living their lives, a balance that was sometimes chaotic but always purposeful. They dealt with funding challenges, staffing issues, the everyday grind of running a nonprofit. But they also went on dates, traveled, in carefully planned accessible trips, argued about stupid things, and built a marriage based on honesty rather than fantasy. Some days were hard. Ginho still dealt with phantom pains, with accessibility barriers in a world not designed for wheelchairs, with the occasional person who assumed disability meant helplessness. Naomi still carried trauma from her own accident and abandonment, still had days where the weight of running a major facility overwhelmed her. But they faced it together. 3 years after the accident, Ginho received an unexpected letter. It arrived at the Phoenix Center, forwarded from his business address, and bore no return address. Inside was a single page, handwritten, from Hygiene. "Ginho, I don't expect you to read this, and I definitely don't expect a response. I just need to say it once, clearly, without lawyers or manipulation. I was wrong. About everything. I abandoned you when you needed me most because I was terrified of what your disability meant for my life. I took your money because I was panicking about my future. I filed for conservatorship because I convinced myself you couldn't function without me, which was really just me trying to justify my betrayal. I was selfish, cruel, and cowardly. I've spent the last 3 years trying to understand why I did what I did, and the only answer I have is that I wasn't strong enough to handle your reality. I wanted the life we'd planned, and when that became impossible, I ran. I see now that you're thriving without me. The Phoenix Center is extraordinary. Your new wife is extraordinary. You've built something meaningful from the worst moment of your life. I just needed you to know that I see my mistakes. I can't undo them, but I see them. And I'm sorry. I hope you're happy. You deserve to be." Ginho read the letter 3 times, then showed it to Naomi. "What do you think?" she asked. "I think she means it. And I think it doesn't change anything. She's sorry, but the sorry doesn't undo the damage. It just closes the door more gently than before." "Are you going to respond?" "No. What would I say? Thanks for the apology 2 years too late?" The best response is just living well. Building what we're building. That's the only answer that matters. He filed the letter away in a drawer and didn't think about it again. Years passed. The Phoenix Center expanded, adding a second location, then a third. Ginho's story, the accident, the betrayal, the fight, The recovery became a case study in some rehabilitation programs about resilience and autonomy. He was asked to speak at conferences occasionally, though he always deflected most of the credit to Naomi and the staff. He never fully regained sensation below his chest. But he regained everything else that mattered: agency, purpose, love, dignity. On the 5th anniversary of the accident, Ginho and Naomi returned to the site where it had happened, a stretch of highway that had been repaved and repaired, bearing no evidence of the crash that had changed everything. "What are you feeling?" Naomi asked. "Grateful mostly. Which is weird, considering this is where my life exploded." "Not that weird. This is where your old life ended. But it's also where everything that came after became possible. The Phoenix Center wouldn't exist. We wouldn't exist. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you cracks you open enough to let something better in." That's very poetic for someone who usually tells me to stop being dramatic. I contain multitudes. They stood there, Ginho in his wheelchair, Naomi beside him, watching traffic flow past the spot where everything had changed. Then they turned and headed home, to the life they'd built from the wreckage, together. The Phoenix Center now operates 7 locations across the country. Its model of dignity-based rehabilitation has been adopted by dozens of other facilities. Ginho serves as board chair but has stepped back from daily operations, focusing on advocacy and funding. Naomi runs the clinical programs with the same fierce honesty she brought to Ginho's recovery, training a new generation of caregivers who treat disabled people as whole humans rather than broken objects. They have a son, adopted after years of discussion about what family means and how to build it. He's 4 now, growing up in a house where wheelchairs are normal, where disability is just one aspect of human diversity, where love is measured not by perfection but by presence. Ginho hasn't spoken to Hygiene since the divorce, though he's heard she remarried and moved overseas. Marcus left the real estate industry entirely. David's lawsuit cost him most of his savings and they haven't spoken in years. The vultures who'd circled during Ginho's vulnerability found other prey. Sometimes, late at night, Ginho thinks about the man he was before the accident. Confident, successful, but fundamentally naive about what strength really meant. That man built wealth. This man, the one shaped by paralysis and betrayal and the hard work of rebuilding, built meaning. He doesn't miss his legs. He's surprised by that, but it's true. He'd take them back if offered. He's not delusional about the challenges of disability. But he wouldn't trade what he's learned, what he's built, who he's become. The accident took his mobility. Hygiene took his trust. But Naomi, fierce, honest, unrelenting Naomi, gave him something more valuable than either. The understanding that true power is autonomy, not control. That love is measured in presence, not perfection. That survival is just the beginning. Living requires choosing yourself, every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. The Phoenix Center's motto, displayed in the lobby of every location, comes from something Naomi said during one of their early sessions. "You're not broken. You're building." It's true for Ginho. It's true for every person who walks or wheels through their doors. It's true for everyone who's ever had to rebuild themselves from wreckage. This is not a story about revenge. It's not even really a story about disability. It's a story about what happens when you refuse to let the worst moment of your life define all the moments that come after. It's a story about choosing dignity over despair, autonomy over acceptance, and building something meaningful from the ruins. And in the end, that's the only kind of story worth telling. What would you have done in Ginho's position? Paralyzed, abandoned, robbed blind while you were unconscious? When the person who promised to love you in sickness and in health couldn't even wait for you to wake up before destroying your life? This story should make your blood boil. It should also restore your faith in humanity, because while Hygiene represents the worst of what people can become when tested, Naomi represents the best. She proves that real love isn't about staying when life is easy. Anyone can do that. Real love is about showing up when everything is falling apart and choosing to fight alongside someone, not because you have to, but because they're worth fighting for. If this story hit you in the chest, if you felt Ginho's rage, his despair, his slow climb back to himself, then I need you to do something for me right now. Smash that like button if you believe dignity matters more than pity, if you believe disability doesn't equal inability, if you believe that the measure of a person is how they rise after falling. Drop a comment below saying, "Dignity over despair," if you're tired of seeing disabled people treated as broken objects instead of whole humans. Tell me, what would you have done differently in Ginho's shoes? Or better yet, tell me about a time you had to rebuild yourself from nothing.